Huawei, you've definitely heard the name. It's this tech giant that's always in the middle of everything: global trade, 5G, and some of the biggest political firestorms of our time. But what's the real story? Are we looking at a case of state-sponsored spying, or are they just building world-class tech? Well, the answer is way more complicated than you might think.
Just imagine for a second, what if there was a single hidden flaw buried deep in the fundamental code that powers our entire modern life? A little backdoor that could compromise everything: our phones, our banking, even our power grids. Sounds like a movie plot, right? But this is the very real fear that sits at the heart of this entire story.
And that fear, it wasn't just hypothetical. In May of 2020, it absolutely exploded into the headlines. And it all started with a single piece of code submitted by one Huawei engineer. This thing became a firestorm, and it perfectly captures the paradox at the core of this company. Now, what's really shocking here is who submitted this code. This wasn't some junior developer making a simple mistake. No, this patch came from a level 20 principal security staffer. That's basically the highest technical rank you can get at Huawei. And the vulnerability itself, it wasn't subtle. Security researchers called it trivially exploitable. So why is this such a big deal? Well, we have to understand what the Linux kernel actually is. Think of it like the brainstem of an operating system. It's the absolute core, the foundational code that controls everything a computer does at its most basic level. It's not an app you use, it's the very ground that all the apps are built on top of. And because of that, the stakes could not be higher. You see, the Linux kernel isn't some niche software for hobbyists. It runs most of the internet's web servers. It's the foundation of the Android operating system on billions of phones, probably the one in your pocket. But it also runs power plants, air traffic control systems, and even life-saving medical devices like ventilators. A backdoor here isn't just a privacy problem. It's a potential threat to our entire global infrastructure. And if that wasn't suspicious enough, Huawei's response just poured gasoline on the fire. First, they claimed this super high-level engineer was just acting on his own. But then, investigators found that a notice trying to distance the company from the code was secretly added to a public repository and then backdated to make it look like it was there all along. This attempt to cover their tracks, as you can imagine, made a lot of people even more suspicious. And that suspicion, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. To really get why people reacted so strongly to the Linux incident, you have to understand that for a lot of governments, this felt like just the latest chapter in a very, very long story. This timeline really puts it all into perspective. The company was founded way back in 1987 by a former engineer from the Chinese People's Liberation Army. As it grew like wildfire, it faced all these allegations of stealing intellectual property, and this all came to a head in 2012, years before the Linux thing, when the US Congress officially labeled the company a national security threat. And that 2012 report, it was absolutely scathing. The committee basically said that Huawei couldn't be trusted to be free from Chinese state influence, that its own officials were evasive when they testified, and that they just wouldn't explain their relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. They also pointed to a history of IP violations, including a huge lawsuit with Cisco, as part of a larger pattern of behavior. This one quote from the report really captures the mood. After a massive investigation, the committee felt that Huawei simply refused to be transparent, and that created this deep, lasting foundation of distrust. So based on all this, the case against them seems pretty open and shut, right? But that's before you see the other side of the story. I want you to look at this number, 1.35 minutes. What on earth could this possibly have to do with international espionage? Well, as it turns out, it has everything to do with it, and it makes this whole story a whole lot more complicated. Because that number leads us directly into what I'm calling the Great Huawei Paradox. It represents a piece of evidence that's so strong, it makes you question that whole narrative of a shady, untrustworthy company. So get this, that number, 1.35 minutes, is the average amount of unplanned downtime that Huawei's high-end Kunwen servers have in an entire year. According to a 2024 global reliability report from a firm called iTech, their hardware is unbelievably dependable. We're talking about near-perfect uptime. And this isn't just good, it is truly elite. When you compare them to the other biggest players in the world, Huawei is right up there, at the top, right alongside legendary names like IBM and Lenovo. Their engineering isn't just competent, it's absolutely world-class. So how do you square that? Best-in-class reliability
with the image of a company trying to sneak trivially exploitable code into the world's most critical software. Which brings us right back to the Linux incident. Now that we have this context of their engineering excellence, the debate over what really happened becomes so much more interesting. Was it a deliberate act of sabotage, or just an unbelievably embarrassing mistake? On one hand, you have the case for malice. You've got a top security engineer, a history of shady behavior, and what really looks like a clear attempt at a cover-up. But on the other hand, you have the case for a simple, colossal mistake. Some software engineers who actually looked at the patch said the code was so bad, so full of rookie mistakes, that it was probably just incompetence, not some serious attempt at sabotage. They argued it was so obvious it would never have made it past review anyway. This perspective, which was captured in a popular online forum, really sums up the whole malice argument. The seniority of the engineer combined with the potential impact, it's just too big to be a coincidence. But then you get this counterpoint from another developer. They argue that the flaw was so basic, it's the kind of error a first-year programmer makes. From this point of view, it wasn't some clever, hidden backdoor. It was just bad code from a company that should, and clearly does, know much, much better. So, malice or mistake? Espionage or excellence? The truth is, the answer might actually be yes to all of it. And that reality forces all of us to confront a much bigger, much tougher question about the nature of trust in our modern world. Ultimately, what the Huawei Paradox reveals is that incredible technical excellence and deep-seated suspicion can exist at the exact same time. Trust in technology, it turns out, isn't just about whether the product works well. It's about a company's history, its transparency, and its relationship with its government. The real issue here is just how incredibly hard it is to verify trust when our technology is built by countless hands in countless countries all over the globe. Which leaves us with this one final critical question. When the code that runs our world is written by everyone, everywhere, and the lines between corporate interest and state interest are getting blurrier every day, how do we, as individuals and as entire nations, decide who actually earns our trust?